taste of Africa.
Good evening and thank you for joining me on BizWeek, and I'm so glad and excited that you can find time for us to be able to interact on pertinent issues that are happening within the Zambian business and economic sector. Now, today is a very, very interesting and a special day because the Minister of Finance did have a press briefing together with the International Monetary Fund country representative to be able to just update the nation and allow for people to ask some of the questions that we've seen, some dominate social media and, taking place in various conversations in different settings, and quite a lot did emanate from that particular joint briefing, I must add. And one of the major takeaways that we did see from that briefing is the fact that, the International Monetary Fund Board will be meeting with Zambia being on the agenda to be able to ensure that either an approval is given to the 1.4 billion United States dollars, financial support for an economic or for an IMF program that will be, implemented in Zambia with the sole purpose of economic transformation. And apart from that, we also heard the issue that has been dominating a lot of talk on social media, the issue of conditionalities. A lot of people have been asking, what is it for the IMF, obviously, to be able to grant us this particular financial support? What is it that as a country we are putting on the table? Remember, there is no free lunch in this world, so a lot of people have been very, keen and very repetitive, deliberately asking government to explain to us exactly as Zambians so that we can know, what exactly we are giving, in as much as so as to be able to take or be able to access this particular IMF program that comes with the $1.4 billion financial support. And we did hear the country representative from the International Monetary Fund make it very, very, very vivid that Zambians, or an announcement will be made once the board approves the staff level agreement that the International Monetary Fund and the Zambian government have reached so far. So once that is approved, then the IMF will come on board and be able to give us pointers on what exactly their expectations are, what exactly is involved in this deal. But Finance Minister and National Planning Minister Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane made mention that Zambians ought not to worry because what has been agreed to as part of the conditionalities is not something that, will be able to injure the ordinary citizens. But of course, he did mention that for a period of time, we may have to tighten our belts as ordinary citizens. Another interesting thing that the minister mentioned is that government of Zambia will be engaging creditors, and he also did indicate that concessional financing is an option that remains on the table. Those, of course, and others are some of the major issues that the minister announced, but what we are discussing this evening is also part of the announcement that the minister made. And this is not the first time we are hearing top government officials announcing or making this particular pronouncement. We did hear Bank of Zambia Governor Dr. Denny Kalialia talking about an administrative adjustment of fuel and electricity tariffs. And we also heard Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane, Finance and National Planning Minister, also making mention that it is inevitable for this to be done. And tonight, that is what we are looking at. Electricity and fuel prices will be going up. The minister did mention that emphatically. So as we are watching today's episode, we want to particularly get to hear from you as an ordinary Zambian. What do you think about this decision? The finance minister mentioned very clearly that this decision is inevitable. Yes, the cost of living will go up. The prices of commodities will go up. The price at which you procure your bread will go up. The price at which you procure your basic commodities will go up. Fuel definitely is the driver of an economy. Once the fuel prices go up, a lot of fundamentals in the economy follow suit. So we would like to know from you, how do you feel that, are you ready as a Zambian, to be able to endure for the next 2, perhaps 3, maybe less years of increased fuel prices? That is what we are asking tonight. And to be able to participate on the program, please be at liberty to call the number that is flashing on your screen right now. And later on, I will be chatting with with economist Kelvin Chisanga, just to get his perspectives on this particular development. Now, we must understand, ladies and gentlemen, that when we talk about electricity and fuel prices, the last time that fuel prices, as the minister was explaining during the briefing, was adjusted in Zambia was December 2019, where we saw a liter of petrol moving from 15 kwacha 98 ngwe to 17 kwacha 62 ngwe, and of course we saw diesel also follow suit from 15 to 15 kwacha 59 ngwe from 14 kwacha 23 ngwe. Kerosene or paraffin, as we all know it, also increased, to 15 kwacha 39 ngwe from 13 kwacha 2 ngwe per liter. So those were some of the adjustments. Now, from 2019 up until 2021, obviously the prices of fuel on the international markets have, adjusted. They've not remained static. As a result, this commodity that we import is also supposed to have been, adjusting according to the prices of the international market for it to remain cost effective, not only for government but also for players in the sector that are contributing to the economic governance of this country. But we have not seen that. Now, you know that when you increase fuel, obviously a lot of things within an economy also begin to increase. You're talking about the increased cost of production. If somebody is baking bread, for example, they have to make deliveries, they have to use either diesel for some of the machines that they use, if not electricity. It does push the cost of production up. So this is something that the manufacturing sector obviously will not be receiving very, very well. Yes, it is inevitable, but its negative impact on critical sectors such as manufacturing, which the president is on record saying needs to be able to take a vital, more active role if Zambia is to realize its prospects of economic recovery. So this is something that the manufacturing sector should be preparing to contend or deal with. Electricity is another interesting subject which Finance Minister Dr. Stombeka Msokotwane mentioned, and of course we know that the subject of electricity has been a contentious issue as well. We know that at the moment the Energy Regulation Board is still working on the cost of service study that is supposed to ensure that the decision made to adjust electricity tariffs is fair. Now, the cost of service study, minus the cost of service study, obviously a lot of stakeholders argue in terms of how fair are these prices, but a cost of service study ensures that the prices that are arrived at by an institution of interest such as the Energy Regulation Board are fair not only to ZESCO but to the consumer as well as to the investor at the same time. So while Finance Minister Dr. Stombeka Msokotwane says fuel hike is inevitable, of course we understand, we know how the exchange rate has been performing at the moment. We understand international prices of oil on the market have not been static. So there, of course, we know that it's inevitable. But where electricity is concerned, we need to know what the cost of service study will be able to suggest as a benchmark, failure to which, again, stakeholders may have challenges to be able to look at this decision in as much as it is inevitable, but the fairness, its partiality will be questioned. So ERB needs to come out and tell us exactly how far the cost of service study has gone. Now, we did interact with an expert in the name of Blessing Skafwanka who had this to say concerning the increase of electricity and fuel tariffs in Zambia.
Well, I think the most important thing that we need to bear in mind is the fact that there's been a lot of changes in the price of crude oil on the international market, and particularly we've seen that the prices of crude oil have surged on the international market, and that has affected, I think, every country around the globe. And when you look at the model that the ERB uses, the cost plus pricing model, according to that model, it's only reasonable that they should be allowed to increase the pump price of fuel to reflect the costs that are incurred in the procurement process. And of course, that particular move might have a negative impact on businesses. Fuel is one of the major inputs in the production process. So in the short term, I think that will have a negative impact on businesses in general. But I think the most important thing that we need to focus on is to look at the other factors that influence the price of fuel. And the other factor that influences the price of fuel is the exchange rate, the rate between the kwacha and the US dollar. And I think that should be our primary focus. So the government should focus on ensuring that the price of, the performance of the kwacha against other convertible currency improves. I think once that is done, it will help to bring down the prices of fuel. So in the meantime, I think it's only fair that the Energy Regulation Board should be allowed to adjust the prices upwards so that whatever subsidy that the government could be incurring at the moment could be taken away. A lot of resources are being spent, and from the official figures that we have been given, the government is spending well over 21 million US dollars per month just on fuel subsidies alone. Those are resources that could be used on other other areas, other needy areas. When you look at the 2022 national budget, there are a lot of areas that need these resources. So I think it's only fair that the subsidy should be taken out, and in the meantime the price of fuel should go up. But over time, as the kwacha begins to improve against other convertible currencies, then we should be able to see a reduction in the price of fuel. And we should also commend the Bank of Zambia for taking a proactive step in anticipation of the anticipated rise in the price of fuel. I think the Bank of Zambia decided to tighten the monetary policy rate because it's well known that when the price of fuel go up, obviously inflation will increase. So the move that has been taken by the Bank of Zambia is more of a proactive approach to try and mitigate the impact that will arise as a result of the price of fuel.
So those are some of the sentiments from financial expert Blessing Skafwanka, who agrees with the Minister of Finance and National Planning, Dr. Stumbeko Msakotwane, that fuel increment is inevitable. And he also points out that in as much as it is inevitable, the business community in Zambia will be negatively affected by this decision. So as government is considering taking this bold decision or this bold step, consideration has to be made on how this can be mitigated, especially to be able to keep the economy afloat. Remember, we are operating on a fiscal expansionary approach with regards to the 2022 national budget, which calls for increased private sector activity. But for increased private sector activity to be achieved, obviously you need fundamentals such as, fuel prices and electricity to be very, very cost effective for the private sector to play their key role in spurring growth and ensuring that the Zambian economy remains on the right path. Now, we go back to the subject of the day, but even before we progress to the subject of the day, remember, we are particularly keen to hear your views on this issue. Electricity fuel prices to go up. No two ways about it. So what is it that you think as an ordinary Zambians? What this may mean for some of you that may still be trying to wrap your head around this is that, for example, for the person that is making bread, obviously they use electricity. If it goes up, it means the price of bread goes up. For the person that, the millers, for example, who are responsible for giving us millimil, which is, used in making our staple food and shema, if the price of electricity goes up, if the price of fuel goes up, it means the price of, or the cost of doing business goes up, and of course the cost of production goes up. As a result, the price of millimil may again increase. So this is in a nutshell what it may and it will, obviously lead to. So let us know what you think. But the minister says, well, this is something that we have to be ready, to endure for a time. And later on, as a country, we will come to a place where we will smile. We will come to a place where we will begin to enjoy. Coming to the issue of the day, the International Monetary Fund engagement with Zambia, a lot of people, and interestingly, have commented on this issue, both experts and lay people. And the beauty about social media is that everyone has a place where they can air their opinions. And talking about opinions on social media, this particular issue of the International Monetary Fund has not only triggered conversation in Zambia, but the discussions, the opinions are pouring in from all directions, including beyond the Zambian borders. Let us see some of the comments that are coming in, and we will start with this particular one, which comes from an opposition member of parliament from South Africa, Mr. Floyd Shivambu, who belongs to the political party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, led by Julius Malema. By the way, we do have a branch in Zambia that is, very, very actively participating in the Zambian political space. So let us see what Mr. Floyd says about Zambia's engagement with the International Monetary Fund. Mr. Floyd says, that is the most foolish and backward decision taken by any country in the world. And President HH, there is historically and presently no country and economy in the world that have been progressively saved by the International Monetary Fund. You have signed a deal with the deal and will suffer. All right. Anyway, let me not add words there, but I bet he was trying to say you've signed a deal with the devil and you will suffer, with the quote of President Hakainde Hichilema's tweet with the International Monetary Fund. Interestingly, Zambia's ambassador to Ethiopia, Emmanuel Mwamba, also took the conversation to social media and also shared his thoughts. And for Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba, obviously the post was very, very long. And one of the things that he is calling for there is that the United Party for National Development government needs to be very, very open when it comes to conditionalities. What is it that we are giving up as a country to be able to secure this 1.4 bailout package from the International Monetary Fund? Something that was answered in today's briefing. So I hope Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba is watching right now and will be keen to hear and see what he says next. We go to other reactions, obviously, that were emanating from social media. Douglas Cholomape says, no, it's not. The poor will suffer unless there is a deliberate measure to lift the impact on the poor, or lessen the impact on the poor. Fuel will lead to higher prices, which will adversely affect lower income people. It's a sad move, but we can't do much. That is Douglas' reaction. Now here's a response to Baba John Peary. He says, not if they handle it well. Not all debt makes you a slave. This would only happen if they don't know what they're doing and misuse the funds. Be rest assured on this one. That is Silo Macha, who is contributing on the development that Zambia has made with the International Monetary Fund. We move on to more reactions on social media to today's meeting, joint press briefing by the International Monetary Fund and the Zambian government. All right, so those are some of the reactions that we're getting from social media. And with me is Mr. Kelvin Chisanga, economist, joining me to be able to deliberate further on this matter. Good evening, Mr. Chisanga.
Good evening. How are you?
Very, very much okay, Mr. Chisanga. As you can see,
Thank you.
there has been a lot of diverse opinions on the International Monetary Fund. Some feel neocolonialism is being perpetuated by institutions such as the International Monetary Fund. Some are blatantly calling it a deal with the devil. And of course, there are all these things that are happening. But just tell us, Mr. Chisanga, is this the right decision that we've made as a country?
Well, to begin with, I would say we do not have one single bullet for us to actually liberate the economic fundamentals for a nation. And obviously we know that IMF is just one part of the solution that we could actually tap into. And considering the number of factors that could actually be portrayed as we speak right this moment, the case of IMF seems to be a good model for now, considering what we need to achieve. Except we have even got an expansionary or a very ambitious budget which is set for next year.
Okay, so Mr. Chisanga, one of the things that I'd like to hear from you is you've said this is one of the decisions that we could have made as a country. Tell us, what other option could we have taken?
Well, if we were to take the longer route, I think the aspect of increasing taxes domestically and also looking at how best we can utilize some of the natural resources like, the Mukula tree and, the mining commodities like copper, it could take a long time for us to realize the economic aspects, our aspirations. So it requires that we need to move our economic wheels from this level. What Zambia is facing a low drum sort of performance. So we need to do a quick rebooting of the economic fundamentals so that we are able to actually dialect it with the very strong economic pillars.
Balance me up, Mr. Kelvin Chisanga here. Minister was very categorical and very vivid in his submission and announcement that yes, it's no longer an issue of a rumor, it is no longer an issue of we don't know whether it will come or it will, but he was very, very categorical that electricity prices will be hiked upwards. He was very categorical that fuel prices will be hiked upwards, but of course with the consolation that the marginal, increments will be very, very, consoling, so to speak, in order to reduce the adverse impact that Zambians may have to be subjected to. So, if you're looking at an expansionary fiscal approach 2022 budget, how does this help the private sector to play a key role in increasing economic activity?
Well, it's from the background where we had the session, and we are just fostering some bit of growth in the economy. Obviously, with the turn of things where we have an expansionary budget and also having a contractionary monetary policy, which was set by the Bank of Zambia, we hope to see some of the things to actually start having some bit of cooling impact in some way, because obviously we are looking at a way of counterbalancing the aspect of inflation, which has been very, very bad for our case. Because, when you have inflation and low economic activities, these are bad mixed. They are quite delicate to handle as well. So I think it is quite imperative that I would say the UPND budget was also made on an assumption to say that they will be able to be funded. And for sure, it has come at a right time. So I think the aspect of increase on the fuel as well as the electricity, it is from the scenario where our fiscal deficit has been growing to a point whereby these are measures that to just help contain within the reasonable parameters so that we're able to see how we can grow the economy. Because if we have a huge deficit on our budget. That's the reason why we have effect of inflation coming through exchange rate, because obviously when we have limited resources, we are finding it very difficult for us to actually push through for issues to do with debt repayments.
You are watching Bizweek with me, Wenson Mavora. To participate on the conversation, all you simply have to do is dial the number that is displaying on your screen. And those of you that are following keenly on social media, drop your comments on the Diamond TV Zambia Facebook page, where this program is currently being streamed live, and we will be able to tackle some of your comments and questions. Mr. Chisenga, coming back to the issue at hand, the International Monetary Fund. One of the things that you've mentioned is the issue of the UPND. One of the questions that people were asking is, is there the issue of sticking to your promises? Are they sticking to their promises in terms of ensuring that that the livelihood of Zambians improves? If we are talking about measures like these being implemented, you yourself has called for the realignment of the United Party for National Development manifesto, taking into account the issue of the International Monetary Fund, the economic ramifications, positive or negative. Why do you think the UPND should realign their manifesto?
You see, they were making alignment of their policies or aspect of location at the point when the IMF was not with them, and they were making it from the political side of plant, of which, if you look at the requirement of the IMF would just cater for something that is just going to benefit the economic governance as well as the aspect of economic affairs in relation to the state profile. So if there was a strong drive to push so much into social sector or social protection on a background of political regalia, I think that would not work so much. So that's the reason why there's a need to have an aggressive desire to actually start aligning some of these policies that are enshrined in the political manifesto. So there's a need to just align to the IMF model of approach.
All right, so one of the persons that is keenly following us on social media, Brighton, says it is not possible to tell whether the decision is right or wrong. As for now, what we can simply do is just wait and see, maybe for a space of 5 years, to be able to see, how this particular decision will pan out and how some of the, implementation will happen under the IMF model that you have just mentioned, Mr. Kelvin Chisanga. Now, it is imperative, when you talk about the International Monetary Fund, Zambia is not short of experts that have not only, dealt closely with the International Monetary Fund, but they've actually been in the inner circle of the International Monetary Fund. We are talking, Chibamba Kanyama, who has worked for the fund himself. And this is what Mr. Kanyama had to say on the issue of Zambia engaging the International Monetary Fund.
IMF has two faces to it. The first one is it had a structural adjustment program that lamentably failed. It failed Africa, it failed wherever, Latin America, wherever it was. And then the Asian crisis, the IMF as well failed there. Those austerity measures, they couldn't work. And in the past 20 years, there has been some significant introspection within the IMF about how it administered these programs. It has realized that it must adjust a lot by consulting more with the local people to have ownership of the program by the people. The recipient countries must own the program. They must consult more with the civil society, trade unions. They must consult more with government itself to debate, discuss, and negotiate the conditionalities. That's how it is now. So you can negotiate the conditionalities unlike the way it used to be before. And the biggest thing which never existed is that IMF now puts part of the conditionalities for a program a wider and deeper social cash transfer arrangement to protect the most vulnerable. So you won't see what you saw in the 1990s. You won't see what used to happen with IMF programs before. And some of the countries that have managed and exited the IMF program, Ghana Of course, there are a lot of lessons to learn from Ghana about what to do and not how to manage a program. We also had Serbia. Serbia is one of the most successful stories because right now it has regained its economic stability. It's creating jobs for people, and there is attraction of investment, both domestic investment and foreign investment. So most of the people who are against the IMF program, because of the legacy issues, the history of the IMF, which fortunately it has managed now. However, I would not say IMF is the best option under all circumstances. It never is an option. Borrowing is never an option. But we are in a situation right now, and Zambians must choose which way to go. Let us be very transparent about this. Let us communicate as much as possible. Let us engage the public, our local stakeholders, about which option works better for them. In my opinion, Zambians must choose whether IMF with its austerity measures, which now are manageable in my opinion, or go our own way to solve our debt crisis, and our own ways to commit as a country some options. One, we may say, let us increase taxation, corporate taxes across the board, mines, manufacturing, everybody, increase corporate taxes to maybe 47-50%. Increase pay as UN from the average 30% or whatever average to say 45-50%. Increase VAT from the 16% to say 25-30%. That way is a sacrifice. We are demonstrating a sacrifice as a people, that we want to come out of this problem without injection of money or support from the International Monetary Fund. Is it doable? I'm not so sure. But whichever way we go, we are in dire trials right now. It's a catch-22 situation. We have to resolve this problem one way or the other.
I love the fact that Mr. Chibamba Kanyama shares some light on, how things have changed with regards to the International Monetary Fund's approach to be able to help nations restore and achieve their fiscal stability. And one of the things that he mentions is the issue of social protection, of which, consoles or brings into the issue of a lot of households. We've seen reports emanate from the Zambia Statistics Agency and other interest groups who have gone out there just to see how Zambian homes are faring in these, economic times that we're living in, and what their findings were indicating was increased vulnerability. But Mr. Kanyama points out to the fact that social protection is an agenda that the International Monetary Fund is seriously considering and looking to as they interact and engage with Zambia. And interestingly, he also mentions the issue of consultation, and this is what, Mr. or Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane has emphatically been mentioning, that this is a homegrown solution. Of course, with consultation with the International Monetary Fund, so it's not like the IMF is coming to throw, things that must be done in our face. No. These are things that we have sat down ourselves, thought through and said, if we did 1, 2, 3, 4, our economy can be able to improve, and the International Monetary Fund is just coming in to be able to provide the technical assistance on other things, and of course provide the balance of payment financial support that is required to also improve our debt, perspective and perception, even as we endeavor to continue engaging out there. As I come back to you, Mr. Chisanga, one of the people that is watching us online right now by the name of Zangulako ZM says, let's come back to comment on this issue next year on the same day. For now, let's just observe and see how this thing is going to work out. As we look at this view, Mr. Chisanga, COVID-19 at the moment is still mutating and posing challenges that are very difficult to ascertain the extent of on the economy and the livelihoods of people. So if fuel prices are going to go up, if electricity is going to go up, and we are yet to see what's going to happen with the COVID-19 situation, what are your thoughts?
Well, we are in a very tough time. Obviously, starting from last year, as we're transversing into even next year, it is still quite tough. But obviously, the fundamentals have actually shown some positive sentiment, especially when you look at the performance of the third quarter for 2021. It has shown some bit of good to positive nature. So it's from this background that we are able to see that we will be able to do a little bit more next year, and consider that when you look at the expansionary side of things on the budget, we seem to have a situation where we are going to have a lot of outflow in terms of currency commodity.
Also has to do with the issue of borrowing. Now we know that debt is something that has not spared the Zambian, plans, for the government. Of course, the fiscal objectives, the objectives enshrined in the 2022 national budget, they are all at the moment still trying to gain footing vis-a-vis a heavy load of the issue called debt. Now, the minister, when he was asked about the issue of debt, he made it very clear that concessional financing is still an option that remains on the table. So, how should the UPND handle this debt thing to be different from their predecessors?
Yes, I'm glad that you have mentioned concessional term. Basically, even what we are getting from the IMF is concessional loan, which are almost closer, they're fairly almost close to the market conditions, and compared to the non-concession that we actually went for in the previous, administration, where we had the, talks the Eurobond as well as Chinese loans. So I think the concessional side of things is a good flag to go with, but again, also there must be a bit of moratorium to ensure that we do not contract the way we did in the previous, previous 10 years. We need to ensure that we have a good debt management and sustainability. And even now, we need to foster much more, as they mentioned, the transparent aspect as well, which is actually quite key. Though actually, also it was quite mentioned also from the IMF side, saying that they need to keep monitoring to see how best we can share some of these ideas.
Okay, so bringing you back to the issue of subsidies, Mr. Chisanga, I know that a lot that we're looking at right now is the issue of fuel and, maybe electricity. But another area that, we saw even from the 2022 national budget, government increasing funding on is the agriculture sector. We're talking about the issue of the Farmer Input Support Program. So going forward, what other areas should Zambians look out for the removal of subsidies?
Well, as you have said, obviously, in the Zambian case, when you look at the total budget for last year and probably the one that is running to this year, of course, we know that last year it had about 14.5 deficit. Then this year we are anticipating to have somewhere around maybe 16 or even less because of things like elections and a few other things that we actually had to contract. For your own information, if you look at the current budget which has been running, which is coming to an end this month, was supposed to spend about 89.5 billion Zambian kwacha to just buy some of the things. But we went beyond. We are almost close to about 104 billion in terms of expense. So that tells you to say that we've got about 25% overrun in this budget. So if you look at the many leakages that we have actually seen, even from the budget deficit most of the time, fuel, subsidies on electricity, as well as agriculture input. So there's a need for us to see how best can we balance up this. Obviously, yes, we need to also support the social cash transfer, which is actually a very key component in this. But again, also, what we need to do is that we need to ensure that we see how best can we reduce the deficit on our national budget.
So the minister mentioned the issue of, the employment of 30,000 teachers and 11,000 health personnel, something that, according to him, the International Monetary Fund endorsed. And of course, we know that, part of the special drawing rights, as he had indicated, can be used to be able to settle salaries. But going forward, do you think that we will be in a position, or what can be done to put us in a position where we can balance between adequate domestic resource mobilization to be able to settle our debts, and at the same time, be able to ensure that emoluments, which by the way will be increasing with these people that will be employed going forward. So where sustainability is concerned, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think first to begin with, this is the right direction that they have taken, because obviously when you have a productive society which is actually educated, and also its health, because obviously these two elements that they have tackled, the education as well as health sectors, they are quite essential in the economic formula, because what will happen in this case that once we have people coming out of education, they are going to be productive in their own sense. So we have a huge level of increased economic agents, and we'll be able to actually lubricate the economy from that perspective. And similarly, when you are health, you'll be able to make money, because obviously you cannot make money when your health is compromised. So that engagement where they have focused so much on these two, I think that's a good way. But again, also, if you look at even the other component, I know the part of government service in terms of salaries, it's quite ballooned. But again, so we have seen that the IMF SDR is coming to act as a cooling effect on that one.
All right. So earlier on, Mr. Tsanga, you talked about the issue of, reducing the budget deficit, and the International Monetary Fund representative that was participating in the briefing this afternoon also mentioned that that is something that the International Monetary Fund is, keenly keeping tabs on. Let us hear what Mr. Sean Tembo has to say with regards managing deficit vis-a-vis going ahead with this decision to be able to bring on board the International Monetary Fund with the hopes of restoring fiscal stability. All right. We'll be shortly. All right.
Ichirema is celebrating the staff level approval of the 1.4 billion kwacha loan by the International Monetary Fund, which is to be disbursed over a period of 3 years. When you divide this amount by 3 years, you realize that it comes down to slightly above $650 million per annum. And when you look at the amount which was budgeted in the 2022 budget for IMF borrowing in terms of the revenues, it is about 52 billion kwacha, which translates to almost 3 billion kwacha. So you realize that there's a huge deficit here. And also, when you look at the 2022 budget, you realize that there is no contingency amount on the revenue side. So whenever there is a deficit, it means that deficit needs to be met in the budget. And government has not put on the table any measures that it intends to actually implement to try and basically fill that deficit that has arisen as a result of the International Monetary Fund not giving Zambia the debt which we had budgeted for in the 2022 budget. But also the other angle to this issue is that the 650 million per annum or so that President Hichilema is celebrating about is money that we could have easily raised from the mines by simply taxing the mines, had he not given them an unnecessary tax holiday in terms of mineral royalty tax. And at the end of the day, as a nation, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. Instead of collecting tax revenue, which is due to the Treasury, we go about with a begging bowl to go and borrow money, which we eventually have to pay back. So we are not really making any significant progress as a nation, not at all. And therefore, there is nothing worth celebrating about in terms of the staff level agreement that was reached with the International Monetary Fund to access the 1.4 billion kwacha loan over a period of 3 years.
All right, so those are some of the sentiments from patriots for economic, patriots for economic party leader Sean Temple. And Mr. Chisanga, as we get to close this session, unfortunately, due to the interest of time, what are your thoughts? Mr. Temple thinks that this decision is leading to, budget deficit.
Well, I wouldn't agree per se, but the bottom line here is that the concessional mineral oil that has been slapped, which you might be thinking of saying, if we take 5 years, we can raise some money within that bracket. Yes, it could be possible, but also they are not considering some other repercussions or other some of the retrospective effect that could also happen as a result of the change in the market. Obviously, you have you are very much preview that sometimes copper can actually go down, can go up. So we cannot actually anticipate the stability of copper prices on the international market. Yeah, quite okay. If you look at the IMF when it is coming this way, it is just basically coming to put a lot of things in place. As I mentioned, the Zambian economic perspective does not need one way to actually sustain the economy. It needs quite a number of unison efforts in which we can actually look from different multi-sectoral partners as well as bilateral partners. So it's a compendium of many cases that we can look at. So it's not just something that we can look as a single package bullet.
All right, Mr. Kelvin Chisanga, economist, thank you for joining me on BizWeek this evening, and of course, looking at some of the important happenings within the Zambian fiscal space. And this evening, we're looking at the hike of fuel and electricity price that Finance and National Planning Minister Dr. Stombeko Msokotwane mentioned this afternoon during a joint press briefing with the International Monetary Fund. And of course, we were discussing and sharing perspectives on the engagement between the Zambian government and the International Monetary Fund, which has made significant progress. And very soon, what we learned this afternoon is that the board of the International Monetary Fund will be meeting to be able to make a verdict on whether this staff level agreement that will see Zambia secure 1.4 billion kwacha bailout package will be approved or rejected for further, fine-tuning or amendments of one or two things so that we can see how best we can proceed. And those of you that are following us online, also thank you very much for taking part. Remember, this is your platform. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
bamuna banga babwela
abakashibandishiwa tekuti balando kutila nakuisa abalendo namupalana komwe nomba imwe nkandayile muneke yatelela kuti bakusanganisha bushe masu banjimufuta
Romeo glycerin chabe.
I have bought some Romeo glycerin for my wife. Nomba kwena bakashibesu imikonso kubuturuka kwati milomo ya chiradi atute
batatu wake mtali
bakashibandi
ndiye bamene mmankaba ku bantu ivo
awe ndese kakofye
na banani
ndese kafye.
Protect and nourish your skin with Romeo glycerin.